What's going on, guys? It's your boy Beatsbyash back at it again with another episode of the Table One podcast, and I am joined by Mike, all the way from 100 miles down the highway, formerly known as the People's Champ of the One Piece Texas Regional, loading TCG. How are you doing today, my guy?
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I mean, I know we went down two different paths this weekend. I went down to Collecticon in Houston, the largest trading card game and collectibles convention, and you went down to the Fort Worth One Piece Regional. You want to go ahead and give us a quick rundown on how that went? How was your experience?
I don't know, man. It was mixed feelings this time. It wasn't as fun, I'd say that. I played a deck that I shouldn't have played. I ended up dropping from the event like round 4. And then I just slowly saw the homies just like, hit X2, hit X3 and just drop. And then I think I was like one of the only ones from OKC that like stayed the night. So everybody just like bounced after they dropped. So it was a weird experience. Not my favorite regional, for sure.
And this was hosted by the infamous Play TCG, correct?
Yeah, dude, they were putting out table numbers at like 9:50 when the event started at 10. I don't know, man. Yeah, the venue wasn't great either. Like, they didn't even have a water fountain. I was like, what are we supposed to do, man?
Damn, I called my buddy at like 6:30 in the afternoon, and he was like, yeah, we got one more round left to go. And I'm like, what? I thought the tournament would be over by then. I was like, dang, I'm glad I'm not playing right now.
Right? No, like, we started, like, round 1 was supposed to start at 10, right? But they were at 10 o'clock is when they started signing up people from the wait list.
Oh, damn.
So, yeah, I mean, we ended up having 512 there, but, like, I mean, round 1 didn't start till, like, 35 minutes later. So, I don't know. And we got the infamous lunch break, which after I had dropped before lunch, and then me and my buddies went and got lunch. Some of them were still playing in the tournament, including my wife. She played all the way. She actually went X3 and got 98th. So that was cool. She got some additional prizing. So she had a jet from lunch, but it was a couple of us just left over. We decided to, get some beers at lunch and have some burgers and like kind of soak up our failures.
Shout out to Mike's wife for outdoing the boys.
Yeah, she stayed in there, so I stayed on the sidelines, cheering her on. She was on Yellow Big Mom. The more respectable yellow deck, I think.
One thing that's been very surprising me about in this game, whenever I actually played against your wife in the last regional, at that time, I'd went against an even split of guys and girls. So I think it was like round 6 or round 7, and I had played against, I think, 3 guys, 3 girls. And I just think that's crazy because every other card game, I swear I'll go against maybe one girl 1 out of every 5 events, maybe if it's like round 1. But typically later in the tournament, if I'm doing well, I don't go against girls or there's not that many girls there in general. But for some reason in One Piece, they just got the magnet going on.
Yeah, I will say the field is more diverse, which is kind of cool to see. I know Pokemon is like typically the more diverse card game you see women at and people of other genders and whatnot. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see that in One Piece. Well, I know Wizards of the Coast tries their damnedest to make it more diverse, but it's almost to like, I don't know, it almost feels like they're force feeding it a little too much. It's like, okay, you can, because I think there was one tournament where it was like a pro tour, and then like half of the players were just streamers. Like they didn't have any like pro player qualifications other than like they stream on Twitch, they stream Magic Arena, and a lot of the streamers were female. And I get that they were trying to like have a diverse scene, but it just felt really forced, and I don't think it was well received from other people. Especially like pro players and like a Magic people they're always gonna bitch. Like that's their favorite thing to do is like bitch about Magic or other things just because they're in this like abusive relationship with the game where it's like they hate it but they can't sell out because they feel like they've invested so much. So like they were just complaining. They're like, oh, they don't have any like qualifications to be in there other than they're a streamer, which, I see the argument, but
yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. The one good thing about Magic is that the cards hold a lot of stability, so it can be harder to get out of the game whenever you have all these lands that just stay steady like $15-20. It's like there's no urgency for me to sell these right now because I know my cards are going to carry weight, a couple years down the road, which is actually not the case in the game that we're currently playing with the announcement that was made about 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago of the bans and then the lifting of those bans. We saw some crazy things in the market going on with the dropping of prices on stuff like, Altar Nami. And Altar Edward Newgate, I'm sure, was going down. I don't really know about that, but I do know at the convention that there was a lot of people selling out in that regard, since there was like over 200 different vendors there. They had Troll and Toad, they had PSA, you could get your stuff graded, so it was pretty cool. But I saw a lot of people selling out. My homie, he made like a lot of like deals and stuff with the vendors, and then the day that we leave, they make that announcement and he texts me, he's like, oh yeah, the bans are being lifted. I'm like, okay, well, what was the point of these bans? That lasts about 3 weeks.
Yeah, it makes no sense to me. I don't know what they're trying to do, because I've playtested a little bit of OP5, and I don't think Whitebeard necessarily just goes away. It's still a deck.
Interesting. I was talking to some people and they were telling me that they feel like Whitebeard is not really usable in set 5 just because of the rampant amount of power creep. But, I could be wrong on that regard.
You should playtest it, dude. Because I was on Purple Luffy and my buddy was playing Newgate, and that just felt like a slaughter, dude. I don't know. Of course, you're always going to get different results with different people because people play differently, and like there's definitely scattered results. It's not like Pokemon where you're just like, oh, this deck just loses to Lost Box, blah 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 blah. Like, I mean, for example, I played Newgate in Fort Worth and I went X3 after round 4, and I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. So I just dropped. Didn't want to play. I was practicing with Grape Dofi before, and then I pivoted to Newgate for some reason. I think it had a lot to do with that ban list. I was like, oh, it's the last time I can play Newgate.
Sure. I think that a lot of that is a derivative of the fact that the card game is very diverse. I mean, I've said this time and time again that one thing that's different about this TCG than others in the current state of the game is that the best deck isn't like 20 to 30% better than all other leaders or all other archetypes that you could play. And so a lot of it comes down to not how well you built your deck, but more on the side of what matchups did you go against. I'm sure if you're the best Newgate player in the world and you went against 3 Laws in a row at the very beginning of the tournament, your chances to win those matchups are very unlikely, versus if you win against 3 Katakuris, it's going to be on the other side of the scale. So, that's something to think about, is like, you can't really put that on yourself if the matchup wasn't in your favor, because there's not a lot of advantages you can gain with deck building with how solved the game is and how small the card pool is and just how much information is out there, right?
Right, for sure. And like that's like in this game, like matchups are everything. Not everything, but like you were saying, it's just a huge part. Because like my first round was Law, and he smoked me because he saw, if it was like textbook Law, like what do you want to see in Law? He saw all of it, like just searchers to Dans, just kept repeating those Bonnie into 5-drop, and then 5-drop into restand Law. Just like he was being super aggressive too, which is like what you want to do against Newgate with Law, like to the point where I just couldn't catch up. Second round opponent was a Katakuri, and he had a Big Mom down, and I played a Chopper, and then he Strusened my Chopper, and he was able to. I didn't have enough counter power with like his field, because I would have if I would have had my Chopper, but I only had one. And then round 3, I got the dub against the Katakuri. I played a Nami turn 1 and grabbed a Rad Beam, and he was like, "What does that do?" And I was like, "You don't know what a Rad Beam does? What are you doing here, my man?" And then yeah, so I was like, "Oh, this is no offense to him. Like he was already huffing and puffing when I sat down. He's like, "Oh, you're playing Whitebeard?" I was like, "Dude, do you know where you're at? There's 512 people. Of course, like half the field's gonna be playing like, the boogeyman, and he's playing Katakuri." I'm like, "You're the other, you know." Any, I don't understand that mentality. Like people are gonna choose the decks they play, and you should never deck shame someone. Like if someone wants to play Nami, and people get mad, they're like, "Oh, I don't like playing against Nami." It's like, well, you better know how to beat Nami, because you don't want to just get finessed by someone who like knows how to play it, and you just have never played the matchup because you don't like playing against it.
Yeah, I encourage people to play Nami because I like free wins.
Yeah, same here, dude. Nami is just like you get a couple buys down and you swing the right numbers, and then it's like, oh, it was close. I had 3 cards in my deck. It's like, yeah, Nami's always gonna lose with 3 cards in their deck, or somewhere around there, Like that's just how the deck goes.
Yeah, especially when you're playing Newgate and it's like, okay, I have to go for lethal on this specific turn. So I've kind of calculated out, what's going to happen over the course of the next 3 turns. So even though it seems like it's close because you had 3 cards in deck, I knew that I was going to go for game, 2 turns ago. And I knew that you would have this amount of cards. So it was already kind of like, set out to be the path that it was. So it's actually not very close at all.
No, it's not. And I think a lot of people, they feel like it's close, but you're like, no, they're going to get down to that many cards. But like like you're saying, if you just swing the right numbers, you're fine. Because like against Nami, you really only need your leader and like 2 extra bodies on board. And like once you get those down and established, you just start swinging.
100%. And I think, it's really hard to win with Nami versus Newgate because I think one of the like best things that the deck has going for it is the 5-cost Zeph, where, if you hit that and you're able to make the other guy mill 7, and also like if you do get the bounce, that can be a huge tempo swing. And obviously like the game has been very tempo based since its conception. And when you're going against Whitebeard, which traditionally has the most 2K counters out of any other deck, and you're already 1K power above that, it's very easy to stop them from hitting with Zeph. And if they can't do that, it's not going to be close at all, really. Like, I've seen that been one of the differentiating factors of, like, Nami winning most of the games that I've seen. I could be wrong, but I feel like that has a lot to do with you winning the game with Nami. Most time I see games play out is hitting with that Zeph and milling additional 7.
Yeah, I agree. And, there's been games with Nami where I've had a Zeph connect and they milled a 7 and I still won that game. Pretty rare, but just keep your blockers up. Another thing with that matchup too is Nami never swings at life, unless they're swinging with Zeph. So like you're missing out on, essentially your second hand, which is your life. But with a Newgate, it's just like, no, I'm going to get those cards either way. So they're just going to have so much more counter power, and I think that's why that matchup's so polarizing for Nami. It's just like, oh, they're going to get that big hand either way. So
I completely agree. How do you feel about the current state of the meta, and what is your decision going into set 5? So I'll go ahead and give my take personally. I'm probably just taking a break until the new set comes out because the only deck I really truly own on my own is the Red Zoro deck, and I'm not very interested in playing in this meta where the most popular deck is going to be Katakuri. And I think I'll just wait till set 5. So what are your thoughts?
Well, most of the shops in my area are not adapting to ban restricted lists because they're like, there's no point. It's 3 weeks. Why are we doing this? So everybody's like, play your Newgates, play your Doduns, play your Namis, whatever, because there's just no point. Like, I get it if you're doing like a Treasury Cup or if you're in the Pasadena regional, or like a big tournament like that. I get that, you got to do that. But if you're not in one of those tournaments, and you're like you're saying, if your area is adopting that, just take a break. Go do something else, play some video games, read some books, or manga or something, or play on the sim, test for OP5 or something. I don't know, just don't go play, because yeah, like you said, it's going to be Katakuri just dominant. But no, So my area is not really a couple of shops I think are, a couple shops aren't. I'm going to be playing out the ones that just don't adapt it. I mean, what does it do to ban and restrict those cards for 3 weeks? It's like there's a barking dog at you and they just take it away and you're like, oh, okay, I feel better now. And then the dog just comes back and it just, it's still going to be there. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not, but I think it's just stupid. I think Bandai, they folded into pressure because people were mad. I don't know. I think they should have just stuck to their guns and just kept it if they were going to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just like one thing going forward is I found this game to be very difficult to like actually like customize your deck and get into the alternate arts personally. I have a background of Yu-Gi-Oh! And typically I would use a deck that a lot of times, like my OG deck Sky Strikers, it has like a estimated value of about $2,000 because of all the rarities and stuff I have in it. Well, in this game, it's kind of hard to get your hands on the alt arts if you want to like max a deck, because a lot of times when you want to pick one up, someone probably doesn't have 4. And for me, I don't want to have like 2 of this, 2 of non, because in Yu-Gi-Oh, it wasn't really about maxing out the deck to me. It's about the fact that there are multiple different kinds of rarities, and I wanted to customize the deck to be the rarities that I personally enjoyed the most, right? Whereas in this game, that's not really the same. So like, even in my Zoro deck, I would play common Namis that came in the like promo pack or like giveaways and stuff, because I just wanted all my searchers, all of the cards that are within a given role, to be the same rarity. And in this game, you can't really do that. And on top of that, it's like the only alt arts I personally owned. Number one, whenever they gave the bans to the 4-cost Marco and the other stuff, whatever that was at that time, I only had like a max rarity Newgate core. And I didn't even play Newgate, but I just had all those. I just ended up with them. I liked collecting them. And that really just decentivized me from going down that route of collecting, max rarity stuff, because we can see from what they're willing to do, they don't really care about the player's investments, which is a very different angle from, other card games where Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic, when there is a ban, even though in Yu-Gi-Oh! You don't know when the ban is coming, you know what is probably going to get banned, and a lot of times it still has some playability. Whereas in this case, it's like Zoro is the only deck I really own, and I have 4 or 5-cost Marco alt art. I have an alt art Newgate leader, and the fact they're willing to do that stuff just makes me not really want to invest in those, because the things that I want, it's going to cost a lot of money to actually like complete, and I don't want to have like half alt arts of all of this one type of card and half non, and I don't want the value to be depreciated. I understand some cards are going to be naturally power creeped out of the game, but that's something that I'm going to focus on less going forward.
I agree. And I've kind of, in the beginning of the game, I was collecting alts. And then right now, like the prices of OP War and stuff, it's too expensive for me to keep them, because, I only have a part-time job at the moment. And I'm playing this game, which, does cost money. So I'm like selling pieces off now to just like make the game pay for itself. But I was originally keeping like alt art leaders, and I was thinking I was going to collect them. But now I'm just like, I'll just play low rarity, And if there's like one leader I like, maybe I'll spend the money on it for that season, and then just like, I don't know, sell it for $30 when it falls off or something. Because there's no point in keeping alts if they're going to do this, for sure. They don't care about the collector. They do care about the collector aspect, and then they don't. I don't know. They need to figure out a new system with their ban restricted list, because it's just it feels too impulsive.
I completely understand, and I do want to kind of touch on the inconsistency of alt arts in general, because, for me personally, let's say, for example, like 5-cost alt art Marco. I love that it has the like blue background, and I love where it has the texture on it. And, you think that since something is an alt art, or it's not an alt art, that there are basically 2 rarities, right? But that's actually not really the case. because it's like, the Marco, that's really nice. But then you have some cards where it's like, okay, there's only texture in this one square on the art, and that's not even really like what the art is encapsulating. And this one is it's just a badly done alt art. And you could almost argue that that shouldn't even be considered the same rarity as some of the other ones. And it's just kind of making for like a weird way to customize your deck, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I follow. Yeah, there's prettier alts than others, and the texture thing is weird, but I get it. I'm not a collector, so like none of that stuff. Like it looks cool, and it appealed to me at first because when the game in its like first conception, like there was some just like screen grabs and stuff. There's some ugly looking ass cards. And so I was like, oh, the alts are pretty. They're actually doing some effort now. But now the art's getting better. So I'm just like, unless it's a screen grab, like I'll just play with the regular one.
100%, and you think about like some of the other things, like let's say you invested in a alt art Nami, or maybe that's not the best example, an alt art Zoro leader, and then they come out with this like gift collection version that's also an alt art. So if you're a person that doesn't want to play with like the common zoomed in Zoro, you have this other option. But we didn't know they were going to do that from the beginning. So then it really does hurt what you're talking about, that collector aspect. And it really should be labeled as two different rarities. It's like, why are these both considered the same exact rarity when they have nothing to do with like being the same thing? I'm talking about the gift collection Zoro. Isn't that the gift collection, like the Zoro leader?
No, that was I forgot where that came from. It was like one of those binders that you got on like premium Bandai.
Okay, yeah. So it's like, how is that considered the same thing as the Altar Zoro from the first set? Like, they need to have differentiators or different names. Like, even in Magic, they're starting to have like different names. Like, they have this thing called confetti foils that just came out versus like regular foils, like stuff like that. There really should be a differentiation so that you know what you're getting. And that's just something I'm personally not a fan of.
Yeah, the collector market's kind of all over the place. There's not a lot of consistency with what Bandai. I mean, there's just not a lot of consistency with how they're handling One Piece. Like through collector market, through tournament scene, competitive play with the ban list and all this stuff, and then organizers going from there's a day 2 with the top cut to be like just one day undefeated. There's no consistency, in which it's kind of sporadic, and I don't like that. Like figure out a system, run that system for a while, and if you want to change it, don't change it in the middle of the thing. Just wait.
100%. I completely agree with you what you're saying about the consistency, because we can talk about the fact that, at these events, this is the only game I've ever played or ever seen where you have to sign up for an event sometimes 2 to 3 months in advance. And then let's say you did prepare for that in time. One big thing inhibiting me is like, okay, a lot of things can change in that time. Maybe you have something come up at work, or just a life crisis or something. And because, you had to sign up so far in advance, you can't, and you can't always prepare for those sudden changes. And when they do things like, the ban list or the changing of tournament structure, how is that fair to the people who had to get in the line like 2 months in advance? And let's say you're going to the Pasadena Regional 2 months ago, and you've just been practicing this one deck because you don't have a lot of time to spend in the game, but you still want to enjoy this event. It's not really fair to those people to bring on these, unforeseen changes just a few weeks before.
I agree. And, it kind of, they really need to think about it and look at redoing the structure of the tournaments, because it's hard to sign up. If you do sign up, a lot of people just sign up. They're like, I'm going to go, I'm going to go play my 3 rounds on Webcam or whatever and just get my participation. And I paid $30 for participation, and I'm going to go sell it for $120. A lot of those people are just looking to turn a profit. What I would like to see is no cap tournaments. Entry be like $20, and you maybe get like some sleeves or
packs to compensate equivalent value.
Yeah, just packs. Or you could have, or have those supplies that they have now, and then it's just like the first 512 to sign up, get these, or get like a bonus pack or something to sign up early. But like, don't punish people for having bad internet, that can't click fast enough or are doing something during signups, or who like, if you discover a tournament a week later, go fuck yourself. You're way too late. I think packs, just give people packs for their signing up. Don't do a cap, and then just like they could do that participation pricing to the 256 topping, and you'd have more people. I think you'd have more people playing. And you wouldn't have all this. Yeah, it's just frustrating.
I completely understand. The consistencies of the game are a lot of what's causing people to stop playing. And that's partially why I wanted to have this conversation today, is to talk about how the direction of the game is changing, and really who the game is for is drastically changing, in my opinion. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. So for me personally, the best way to, combat like a competitive TCG, or one that's going to have these big tournaments, is to power creep in a different way that they've been going about it. So what I mean by this is, traditionally, let's say a card like 5-cost Marco. That's a card that we really shouldn't have seen until 4 or 5 sets down the line, because I understand there needs to be power creep, but that's a card that doesn't add additional elements to the game in terms of the gameplay being more in-depth, or, make solving the puzzle of those game states more complex. It just increased the stat line of what your standard 5-drop is supposed to be, which just weans out other choices that you currently had, and causes people to have the same deck, but doesn't force people to, think about the game in a different way, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, we're still. What's nice about this game, I'll give a compliment, here, is that we're 4 sets in and going into set 5. I still see deck lists that just run vanillas, and I'm like, man, a lot of games those are gone. By set 4 or 5, like there's just better stuff to play. So the fact that we still have to play vanillas in some decks, I kind of like that. But I mean, going back to what you're saying, is just like, yeah, you have those vanillas, you run those because they're good stat lines, and then you're just like, well, I also have this 5-drop that does a whole bunch of stuff, and I should definitely just run 4 of these, like, no matter what. Like, there's that Zoro list that didn't run any events that still ran that Marco. They're just like, oh, this is just too good. But yeah, it definitely feels like Marco was a little too early in the game.
I see what you're saying. And so I want to open up the discussion to asking you, what do you think originally compelled people to join the game whenever it was first coming out, outside of the group of people who entered based on nostalgia for the franchise itself? Because I have an answer in my mind, but I'd like to see what you think about that caused the big boom of One Piece from the very beginning.
I think if you look at a lot of the other big 3 card games and other competitive card games, they're all kind of in a not a great spot, like Magic has a format crisis at the moment. It's just, they don't really care about competitive unless it's arena. Go play Commander. Pokemon has balancing issues. Lost Box was a tier 0 deck that they didn't do anything about for a year, and it's just now with the new set Paradox Rift, like, you can start playing other decks. It's like not just all Lost Box variants. So I think a lot of people have been playing those games and have been frustrated. And One Piece was new, and it was, something different, something fresh. Some people would know the IP, whether they like it or not, or not a fan. And I think they tried the game, and they actually liked the game. Because, I mean, yeah, I'm complaining a lot, but I'm complaining because I like the game so much, right? And I don't want to see it just get thrown to the wayside just because of some poor decisions by, Bandai, implementing just, with inconsistencies in a bunch of areas. So I think and like early on, Bandai was doing really well with the game and like the promise of the competitive scene. It seemed like a good competitive game for competitive gamers, right? Because there was a lot of skill involved, it felt like. So there was that, and just, it was fresh. People liked it. It was something new. And I mean, we're still getting new people joining the game. So I think that was initially what drew a lot of people to it. Also, the money. Like, if you remember the Super pre-release, like those prices, I think the winner Luffy was still like, it was $700 to $900. So you're like, oh, I'm gonna go play a pre-release and I'm playing for $1,000 essentially. Yeah, I'll play that game. I'll pick it up for Sunday afternoon, and I think a lot of people picked that up, and they saw the super pre-release decks going high, and Set 1 was such in high demand, and we're coming out of the COVID where the collector market was just, had such a boom for like all the games, like even dead TCGs, like the Harry Potter card game that had prices go up just dumb stuff like Logan Paul opened, I think, G.I. Joe packs on stream by accident, and then like those shot up overnight. Like there was an old dead TCG for that. So there was a collector's market to One Piece 2, and people didn't want to miss out on that because, Set 1 was just so hot. So I think you had the FOMO of the collectors, and I think you had the promise of a good competitive game for the competitive players. And I think that was really like what drew people into that, was the promise on both sides.
I think that's a very fair analysis, but I want to know, after you got your hands on the game and you played it for the first time, what compelled you to keep playing and to go more in depth, start being more consistently enjoying the game?
I mean, mostly here, there was a good local scene. I liked a lot of the people that were starting to play. My wife was playing with me too, which it's hard to get her to, play another card game. She hates Magic and whatnot, and I understand that. I don't love Magic, but I still play it for some reason. I don't know. It's that whole, like I was saying earlier, that Stockholm syndrome. But no, I think it was a good area, like a good group coming into the game, and I wanted to start making content for a game, and I thought it would be a good chance to do that with this because it was so fresh and so new. And I was used to the Bandai games like Digimon, and Digimon was also in a bad place when One Piece released, and I was just starting to play One Piece. I was just enjoying it more. I was enjoying some of the people at locals more. They were kind of fit more, kind of had more in common with me and stuff like that. There were a bunch of people that were just like into manga in general because they liked One Piece, and if you can't see, I like manga a lot. So just connected to with people, on a bunch of different levels there, and I just really liked the game.
I think that's really important to understand, to know what can be improved about the game, going forward, because, like you noted, we're hard on our critiques because we want to see the game thrive. And I think I can talk about this a little bit as a person who I joined the game having really very minimal knowledge of the franchise itself. I was very early into the anime. I'd basically only seen, what was available on Cartoon Network about 8 to 10 years ago as a kid. When I started playing the game, what really compelled me to keep going is the huge hump of the learning curve of the game. In the beginning, you're talking about how there was a lot of skill involved, and a lot of that had to do with, of course, it's a new game, but they introduced a new way to play a two-player, battle-style trading card game where a lot of the skill involved had to do with understanding the math of the game. How should you attack correctly? How should you defend correctly? Because these were not decisive things at the very beginning. And so if you were able to comprehend these concepts before other people, you could get a large competitive advantage. And as a person who had played, most other TCGs competitively, this was still a struggle for me. And I want to do things that are challenging to the mind, that feel rewarding whenever you're putting in more effort. And I think that's what the game really started out as. But now when we look at, what the game's doing, I think we're at a point in the game where I've talked about this, with my friends before. I was a little down about, still making content for this game. Like, is it worth it? Because I personally feel that a lot of people have really left the game. Obviously, there are still new people coming into the game. But as you were saying, there was a big boom at the start of the game with a bunch of collectors, a bunch of people buying and selling. There were a lot of merits to get immersed into the community, into the game. And I think at this point, most people understand those very challenging concepts that when you first enter the game of how to attack correctly and how to defend correctly. And I think those are very important components to know in the beginning when the cards are not very complex. But at this point, I definitely still enjoy the game, but I think my level of excitement going into set 3, set 4 has been lower than it has been at the beginning of the game, because I personally feel like I've conquered those concepts of understanding how to play the game correctly. And at that point, a lot of the challenge has been removed from the game for me. Now, I do still think it's fun, but not even just from a competitive aspect, but from like an aspect of you wanting to challenge yourself and get better. Like I said about the Marco example, people have a really hard time balancing card games with the power creep that has to be inevitable in order for the game to move forward. And one of the issues is that at this point, the gameplay has not become any more complex since set 1, set 2. And I think that's really hurting the game going forward, because we look at set 5 and what it brings. One of the best decks being purple Luffy and yellow Enel. And you see in that meta that those decks have really pushed out a lot of the other strategies in the game. But while doing so, they haven't increased the depth of the gameplay or, the complexity of, the game and removing that challenge. Because we see things like, purple Luffy, it's arguably the best deck, or, is the best deck, because it allows you to not do anything new, right? There's no new mechanics realistically added to the game. We're just adding cards that from a stat line perspective are naturally just better than the previous cards. Like, this deck uses most of the cards from set 1 and the starter decks. Why is the deck good? It's because I can cheat out my 9-drop Kaido on turn 3 of the game. Now, that doesn't make it any more complex or any more skill-based for what I'm doing. It's just that I can do something that is more unfair than you can, and I can do something that was already previously learned how to do, but I can do it faster than you. And I think that's something really bad about the way that the game's going, and I think it's really changing who the game is actually for.
Yeah. So I have a counter question then. Who do you think the game is? Who do you think it's starting to become for,
So I think in the beginning, a lot of like the people who were entering off the boom were coming off of like what you said, other TCGs. I personally came from Yu-Gi-Oh! On the downfall. A lot of people came from Magic on the downfall, or other Bandai games that were on the downfall. And because this was a new, intriguing, and engaging challenge, people wanted to try it. And because there were so many competitive merits in the beginning, not just because of the prize structure, but because of the ability to create a differentiation between myself and the other person, because I process this information first, you were able to feel more rewarded for what you were doing, right? And since that really hasn't increased, I think a lot of those people are going back to their traditional competitive game. And so I'm personally feeling like the game isn't going to be made going forward for the competitive player or for the semi-competitive player that I can only go to locals once every week or twice a week. And my goal is just to become, consistently able to top at the local game store and just get better, right? I think since a lot of that has been removed, like there's now a ceiling on how high you can get at that level. And when you're going to the game store and you're traditionally, let's say you've made a couple pro tours in Magic the Gathering, and you were traditionally a person that liked feeling rewarded for the amount of time you put into the game, even if you're not going to big events, you felt proud about, since I'm putting in all this work, I'm able to consistently top locals and be one of those best people. Well, now the other people around you, they're not really having to put in as much effort as you are, but they're getting to a same level of success. And so it's becoming difficult to differentiate yourself among the pack, and putting in as much time as you want doesn't really seem to help as much as it did in the beginning. There's kind of like a drop-off period of once you get this good, you can only get so good because the gameplay isn't becoming more in-depth. And so I think a lot of those people who liked being challenged are leaving back to their traditional game that they had a lot of nostalgia with and playing this game on the side. And really the game is becoming more set out for those collectors and the casual player base, which I personally don't think is the best way to go about this, because, you know, you think about what is required to sustain a trading card game over the course of, let's say, 30 years, because that's how far back I would say that's about how long their longevity has been. Well, there's two things you need to accommodate for. Number one, you need to have casual people who are buying packs and they just want to collect or just play at home. And then you also need to have a competitive scene of some level, even if there aren't good rewards, because it gives people who do become immersed into the game something to work towards. People enjoy the aspect of the Pro Tour and Magic because they see themselves having potential to eventually get to that level. And so it becomes a very fine line of how can I balance these two groups of consumers? And I think that in One Piece, they're focusing way more on the casual and collector base than they should, because the game can be sustained for those groups based off of the IP itself. Like, they don't have to make the game for those people because everyone already has an attachment to those characters who's going to collect. So they don't even necessarily need to know how to play the game, leaving a lot of room for them to increase the complexity of the game versus something like Magic the Gathering, where I would say it's arguably more important for them to focus on those core group of people who are kitchen table players or collectors, because there really isn't any, anime or, the books aren't even that popular that attract people like that. Most people who collect are just people who have that nostalgia from the first couple sets, and they're only getting those cards from like the first alpha and beta of the game, right? Because those are the ones that have nostalgia. We look at the newer sets of Magic, and it's like, these are all created characters that we've never had an attachment to before. So they need to target those people by coming out with these universes beyond things for like Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who, because there is no nostalgia for that community, for that game. But in One Piece, you can't remove the nostalgia of One Piece. Even if the game sucked, you could just print the cards and they could just make them playing cards. And if they printed them in an enticing way, those people would still buy. That doesn't change how those people are going to buy. And I think that's something that the game company is really not focusing on, is having that, increased complexity of the gameplay itself and the introduction of more in-depth mechanics that change the way the game is played.
Yeah, I think you got a lot right there for sure. And one thing that I think that has kind of ruined One Piece for me, and it's like you said, there is that skill level, there's that skill gap, because like if it's somebody's first time playing One Piece, you'll pick up on it right away. Like playing this many times, you're like, oh, you're new to this game, I can see you're making like very common mistakes, and and that's fine. And I like that and that, like you said, that's one of the things that brought you to the game was that learning curve, and it's also one of the things that brought me to the game. But I think one of the things that has kind of diminished that learning curve is the simulator, and because it's just like, you know, say, you know, someone has a full-time job, they're an engineer, they enjoy the game really well, and they did pretty well in the beginning because, you know, they picked up on some stuff and they played a little bit and they're like, okay, I figured some of this stuff out. Well, now you have these people, you know, who like, you know, just grind games all day on the sim, and then they're like, oh, okay, I've picked up on these learning gaps, and then they might go to locals, and this guy who doesn't have time all of a sudden is getting crushed by these people who he was beaten before, and you're like, well, what the hell happened? It's like, well, because they have this tool now that's accessible to them that's just kind of diminishing that gap, and it's like they're putting in the time, but they're speed running that time. You know, it's not something that's drawn out, and they're learning slowly through the game and like building on it and getting those rewards. It's kind of just like almost like a water hose. You know, they're like, oh, I figured it out. Okay, I'm good now. So I really wish, like, the sim it's a double-edged sword, right? It's great to test and stuff like that, but like I know people that have started to test OP5 like weeks ago, you know, like months ago. Like set one was out maybe like a few weeks, and they were like, oh yeah, Purple Luffy's good. I've already been playing it on the sim and stuff like that. And like, there's people already playing OP6 stuff on the sim, and it's just, I don't know. For me, that that does a lot of things for me. It, you know, it rewards people who just have more free time to like get on there and just like grind out and learn the game, and it takes away so much from the new set. Like, people aren't excited to like open these cards and play with them for the first time because they've already played with them, you know? So they're just like, oh, this is where we're at in the meta, you know, but I've played this meta, I know a little bit of it. I've played that meta, which is coming up, and now I'm starting to play the one that's coming up after that meta. It's just, there's no reward for, it takes away a lot of the excitement. I know for me, because a lot of people will be like, hey, why don't you play on the sim? Why don't you play on the sim? It's because, like, for me, I don't want to play a new set until it comes out, you know? I want to enjoy this set that's currently out while it's out and enjoy those cards because we're never going to have that meta again, right? So if you're just playing all these different metas, it cheapens it. It makes it doesn't feel as fun. Like right now I'm playing OP5 just because I'm, you know, entertaining the thought of going to Nats, and like I have to practice OP5, and it's just like the set doesn't come out for another month, and it's already like it's just going to take away a lot from me because I like opening the new cards and figuring them out as that. And for me as a player, it's definitely hurt my skill, you know, going into new metas, because a lot of people, like, say in my locals or I go to regional or something like that, they've already played this meta, you know, probably a month more than I have, you know? And I'm just over here, you know, trying to challenge myself and make the game still fun, and I get punished for it. So that's just, I think that's bad. I think the sim overall is not great for the game's health and longevity because, you know, we're going to get burnt out because Japan gets it 3 months ahead of us. You know, if we were caught up and doing the sim at the same time, it'd be a different story. Don't mind that. But when you have this lag in the game and you have people, you know, there's people in English, I'm sure right now playing OP6 on the sim as we speak, and that would ruin something for me. Like, what's the point?
I agree with part of what you're saying, and I also, part of me disagrees what you're saying. The part that I do agree about is the element of the sim where it's like, would you be happier if the sim just only allowed us to play with what's available in English?
I would just prefer that it doesn't exist at all.
Okay, that's fair. So for me, I think that I don't like what you're saying about the Asian people giving out all this information, and the sim doesn't help to that because honestly, we just need to have God come back and just destroy the Tower of Babel and just discommunicate these people in a different language from us so that they can't just be giving out this information 3 months in advance. Because if you've come from Yu-Gi-Oh like me, or even somewhat in Magic, a big part to the appeal of the game, specifically in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's all about who can break the game first. And when you have the knowledge, not only that you can play the sim months in advance of that new set, other people have played that set of cards that you're supposed to be experiencing for the first time for 3 months with a larger span of tournaments that will ever be available in the English version of the game. If you look at what tournaments are available in Asia, they have, the Singapore Championship, the Malaysia Championship, the Championship Series Part 2. We don't have any of these events. We don't have these flagship events and all this stuff. Like, there's so many events that I can't even conceptualize in my mind because I don't really know enough about them. But I do know that the amount of, competitive merits and the opportunities that these people have is so much more vast and wide than what we have. And I think that I would be a little less irritated by the skill level cap in the game if it wasn't for the people who have been playing the game way longer than us with those cards that we're not even experiencing with, just openly giving away the results of this stuff. For me, I love to discover new strategies. I've basically built my card game career off of coming up with these decks and coming up with these strategies that no one thought of, so that I was able to get an advantage over the crowd. And with the way that people are approaching the game and just regurgitating all this information that other people have, found success with, it really just steals that element away from us. And that's something that I'm personally not happy with. Now,
I agree.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I agree.
Yeah, that really stings the competitive merits of the game because the deck building advantage is just not available in the game.
It doesn't exist. Yeah, it just doesn't. Yeah. It's like you're trying to solve 10% of the deck, 90% of that deck's already solved. And yeah, and if someone, let me adjust my camera real quick. And I don't mean to interrupt you, but yeah, I know you enjoy deck building, and I really enjoy deck building. For me, it's a puzzle. I like to figure that out. And that sucks with these games. It's just it's a small puzzle. It's not as fun.
Yeah, going back to if I had to isolate the most enjoyment I've had in the game, it would probably be in set 2. Whenever I built the Doflamingo deck and I was able to gather a large amount of success, and a lot of people started, noticing that the information I was providing was highly valuable, because at that time I would equate myself with being the first person to solve the blue Doflamingo deck. And the only reason why I was able to do that and garnish so much success and actually clap up the boy Mike in the first case tournament was because Asia didn't have the Jimbei promo until they got it to the last week of their meta in a magazine. So because those people overlooked that, and they were telling everyone in English that that was a bad card and this was a bad strategy, I was able to use that to my advantage. And shortly after that, there was nothing else like that coming to the game where I could create a deck building advantage or separate myself from what other people were doing until we got that ban list that slightly differentiated our meta from their meta. And I was able to actually, come up with some success with the 16 Searcher Zoro deck. But outside of that, it's really just been a plateau of how much enjoyment and engagement I can get in increasing the size of the puzzle like you're talking about. For me, the way I like to approach card games is I see building a deck as a puzzle. And the way I solve that puzzle is by perfecting this deck and winning enough tournaments in a given time to where I feel like I've done everything I wanted to do with this strategy, and then I move on to the next puzzle. But really what's happening with the Asia community is, let's say there's 5 puzzles in a given meta. Well, now we just handed 4.5 puzzles over to the Asian community, and the English kids are just over here fighting over half of a pie. You know what I'm saying? It's just not really the same. And that's what I also think took away a lot of the people who were joining the game in the beginning from that boom.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I mean, that's true for a lot of Asian card games, and they're the majority of the market for sure. And I know that's why people probably like Magic, is because over in here in English, like, we get to solve the meta. And I thought that was going to be something I would like about Lorcana, but I just don't like that game. But it's cool that they get to solve the meta. I'm envious of that. I wish for once we'd have like a Japanese card that, has a global release, That would be, if we could catch up to Japan for One Piece, that'd bring a lot of excitement for me, because, and I know it'd bring a lot of excitement for you too, because we both like deck building. That's the fun. And I'll say this, the most fun that I've had with One Piece recently was at the beginning of OP4. I played Blurple Croc for a month and just like kept trying to solve that deck. And I recognized it wasn't the best leader, but I was having fun solving that deck, and I was going like locally, I was going like X1 every time with it, which to me, with like a I'd say tier 2 to tier 3 leader, probably more like a tier 3 leader, like putting up that amount of success, was really rewarding, because I didn't have a deck list for reference or anything like that. It was just me trying to solve this deck, and I really enjoyed it. And I ended up playing it in an online regional, and I went X4, but my worst matchup was Zoro, and I saw 3 of those. And I was just thinking, I was like, man, if I wouldn't have ran into 3 Zoros, I think I could have placed with this deck. So that was something really rewarding. And it's the nice thing about that deck was everyone that played Whitebeard, which I saw 3 that day, and I was playing Blurple Croc, I stole all their dreams, just put them in a glass jar and smashed it. Like, it was gone. Like, that deck just shits on Whitebeard, but it just couldn't do well with going wide strategies, and I recognize that. But I'd say that was the most fun I've had in One Piece, was that month playing that deck, since I'd say OP1 and OP2.
I completely agree, and I see a lot of similarities in, what's attracting you to play the game. And that's why I asked that question, is because I think for a lot of people, that's why they got into the game in the beginning. And, that had to do with the curve of learning in the beginning, that you could feel rewarding even without deck building based on the gameplay itself. And when we're talking about them removing the increased depth of the gameplay, you really have to lean on the deck building itself in order to get enjoyment and get, thought-provoking like aspects of the game, creating a challenge for yourself. When they water down that aspect, it makes it really difficult to be as immersed in the game, because, we've seen, since this game has way longer metas than other card games, that people get pretty tired. Like, for me, for example, I took a big break, like, after, like, the first couple weeks of OP4, because I didn't feel like it really changed the meta too much. And the deck building aspect being diminished really adds on to that, causing people to dip off. You see, there's like a big boom in sales during the pre-release of what people want to buy in the market and how many people are engaged with the game. And that's because it's new content. And they're taking away that aspect of the game with what you're talking about, with the sim, with the way that the Asia community gets their cards first. And I think a good solution to this, I'm just putting this out there, Bandai, is that in Yu-Gi-Oh, they get the cards, later than Japan, but we also get TCG exclusives, which means the card comes to US and the Japanese people don't have access to that card. And even if it's not the best card in the game, it does shape the way that other people have to approach the game, because they know those cards are in the game and someone else could use them. So I'm going to build my deck a little bit differently. And we've seen people like, just like you're saying, have a really strong response to whenever our meta is different than their meta because, just like in Magic, whenever they sent the Pinkertons to that poor guy's house to steal his cards because he released them early, it's because they know that when you steal the enjoyment of opening the product for the first time, you lower a lot of the excitement of the game. And I think, just on a business perspective, you would assume that they would notice that this has been an issue and that honestly, English only ban lists, I think, just like you're saying, I would prefer if the ban list stayed just because it would create a differentiation between us and the Asian meta. Like, honestly, if they're going to keep them so far ahead of us, then there should be a differentiation because that's the only thing like creating that element of discovery in the game.
I agree. And like, so just to like go off on like what you were saying about the ban list, I think how they could do this right would be at the beginning of every English release, they give us our own ban list. Like if in OP4, if they would have said, Dadan is banned, Newgate is banned, 10 drop Big Moms at 1, enjoy the new meta. Like I would have had a field day. I would have been so excited. I'm like, okay, there were all the problems in Japan and like stuff that was going on in English, and they fixed it for this. And like I think they should just do that every new set release. Put stuff on the banned and restricted list, and sometimes just take stuff off. Like say we get to OP6, and they're like, "Hey guys, we're gonna try a thing. We're gonna see if Newgate's still a deck. We're gonna take it off the ban list." And that's kind of how Magic does their ban list too. So I think if we had something like that just differentiated our meta and like rewarded people who liked the deck build, like that would be a lot more enticing, I think, for a lot of people like us.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that they would need to solve this issue of what I'm talking about of like increasing the complexity of the gameplay if that was implemented. Because that also, kind of solves the issue of what I'm talking about. It's like you either need to make the game more complexing and more difficult to solve. That way, even if the Asian people have a timeline advantage over us, what their word isn't their word isn't, the exactly what is correct, right? And so that's why
it's not the gospel.
Yes, and that's why you had enjoyment with the Blurple Croc deck is because the Asian people looked past that. And had they created the best list for Blurple Croc and some people had won with it, I personally would assume you would not have had as nearly as much joy or engagement with playing the game.
No, I don't think so.
A lot of people's favorite deck is Blurple Croc because it causes you to play the game in a different manner than most other decks do. Because now you need to focus on leaving up specific amount of dawn to your opponent's turn. You need to make sure that you can drain your opponent of cards. It's probably like the closest thing to it's honestly the only control deck in the game. Some people will say like, okay, Big Mom is a control deck. I would say it's more of like a ramp-esque like tempo deck. Like almost every deck is just a tempo deck. But Blurple Croc caused you to actually think about the value you're receiving on specific exchanges of cards just because of the way that the deck works. And that's something that's not available in any other style of deck. And so people are attracted to that. When we look at like what set 5 is bringing, the decks don't really introduce any new mechanics or any new concepts. They just improve the stats of previously introduced concepts with, Purple Luffy just being, okay, I get to throw out my fat guy vanillas before you get to throw out yours.
Yeah, mega tempo.deck.
Yeah, what is enjoyable about that? If we got that in set 1, I'd be like, okay, that's fine because it's new. But now we're just power creeping this strategy that was already out, and I don't have a problem with that if the game is at a level of complexity to where there is justification to do so. Because, like in Yu-Gi-Oh!, there's so many different ways you can go about playing the game to where it's like, okay, this new archetype does what that old archetype did better, sure, but there's also still 30 other ways I can play the game and how I can go about solving this puzzle. In One Piece, I think you can say there's arguably like maybe like less than a handful of ways to actually play the game in a unique way. And at that point, it's like, why are we not introducing new ways to play the game? It's so easy to introduce something new because you only have a handful of ways to actually approach the game.
Yeah. It's like I said, we're still playing vanillas. Like, you look at a lot of the purple Luffy decks, and it's just like, wow, y'all are playing 4 of this vanilla. Well, 1 is because of ulti, and then you're like, some are playing the 7/9 drop. Yeah, honestly, when I saw the purple Luffy revealed, I was like, that feels like a set 1, set 2 leader. Like, if we would have had him in set 1 or set 2, I think purple would have been a better deck. I don't think it would have been tier 0. Not even close.
I agree with what you're saying, especially like if we didn't have access to the new cards, we just had those, it's almost just like that's what Kaido should have been in the beginning.
I agree. Like, if that was what Kaido did, like, it'd be a good deck. I think set 1 would have been like, you still would have had, Kid do well. You would have had Zoro still do well. And it's just, I think purple would have done a little better, because purple's never done great, It's always been at best tier 2.
If that.
If that. Shoot, I might even say it's worse than black. In black, I don't like playing black because it's not a functional color. It's got a lot of problems. Like, their tempo is just so bad. Like, okay, to remove a card, I have to give it minus cost. And if I'm not doing that with leaders, that means I have to play another card. Then I have to drop a card to remove something. And then I have to discard a card to also remove it. I'm using 3 cards to kill something. And it's like, what am I getting back from that? Nothing. So it's just, black needs a lot. It has some of the best cards in the game, but it has like the worst overall card pool.
Yeah, and on top of that, you could almost argue that purple and black should really just be one color because a lot of the things that they do are the exact same. We can talk about like the identity of what every color is, and it's like, okay, well, the identity of black is that I can remove your stuff, but I go -1 in card advantage. So it's like you look at like some of the best traditional black cards being like Sakazuki when that first came out. And it's like discard a card, kill their guy, but my card has no counter. And when we compare it to something like 5-cost Marco, where it's like, I thought the removal aspect of black with your characters was supposed to be, black's thing. I thought that was supposed to be their identity. But then we just have a red card that removes their guy for free. Obviously, it's not as like diverse. You can't go as high cost or kill like more valuable threats, but I'm doing it for free, and my card also has a counter. You look at some of the best cards in black, they make you go -1, and they also have no counter. And it's like, since those are the best cards, I have to have like way too many cards with no counter in my deck, when in the Zoro deck I play, the only card that really has like no defensive value is Buggy, which I'm playing on the first turn of the game anyway, and it grabs me a defensive card. So it really does have a defensive aspect. And when you're comparing those two things, it's not really the same thing. Then you look at Purple's identity. Purple's identity is I can kill things, but I have to put my Dawn back into the Dawn deck. So it's essentially like I'm not discarding a card, but I'm foregoing the ability to develop the board next turn. And I don't think that really counts as an identity. Your identity is giving yourself a disadvantage. How is that an identity to the color? Just giving myself a -1 or giving myself less resources to play with than the other person?
Yeah. I think purple's problem too is like it was initially designed to be the ramp color, the ramp big stompy deck. And it just didn't, like, set 2, set 3, set 4. What ramp cards did it get? Like all the ramp cards are contained within the Kaido deck and set 1. So it's just like you're supposed to be the ramp color, but instead you're the minus dawn tempo color. That's just confusing. Like I don't know where you're going with this design. It's not.
It's like it's a completely tempo based game, and your identity is to lose tempo.
Yeah, like when I was building Blurple Croc, I was just like, I'm looking at the list. I'm like, well, shit, this is just a blue deck, you know, most of the time with just like very little purple cards. Cause like in Blurple Croc, I noticed because I was like trying to play queens and stuff like that. When I had stuff that put back too many dawn, I was like, I can't fucking play this. Cause if I go off my curve, you know, like I'm done.
Yeah, you just lose. Blurple Croc really highlights how big of a disadvantage the purple cards are.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I just think if we had someone, if like there was just, say there was one designer for each color, red would be like, have their PhD, this genius child. You're like, oh my goodness, like this is amazing. How did you come up with all this stuff? And then like, yellow must have been a transfer student. He got in there late. You're like, oh, you're doing pretty well, kid. And then the other colors, they're just like, come on, guys, you got to do a little better, you know? Green's probably top of the class, and the other guys are just struggling.
Yeah, purple is basically just like the guy on the workforce where they're like, the government said, okay, we need to hire a certain amount of people from other races or other ethnicities so that we can meet the quota of diversity at our workforce. So we're just going to hire this other guy who just doesn't have a degree just because he fits these specifications. And that he actually has like no reason to be in this position.
Yeah. I think they made too many colors for the game for sure. And that kind of, through a design standpoint, that kind of that can hurt your game a lot. Because it's like, you have to, I mean, Magic has a problem balancing 5 colors, you know? Pokemon, they have 9 colors, you know? And nowadays, it's just like, kind of like gray, you know, if those colors count or not. So it's just like, how do you're designing too much. Like, one piece could be, I think you could boil it down to 4, maybe even 3 colors.
Yeah. You know, you think about Pokemon, it's like, how many of those different colors are actually good at one time, right? So there's really not that many because within the rotation, some of those aren't even like optionally playable.
No, it's like if you pick like a deck and you're like, oh, its only weakness is grass, fucking tight, dude. Like, I will never see my weakness.
100%. Now, before we get too off the topic, I did want to go back to what I not necessarily disagreed with on your discussion of the sim, but I guess I just see the sim in a different way. Now, I agree with you that like the sim isn't necessarily a good thing for the game, but I guess I just don't see the sim as being as much of an advantage as you do to people like that, because I think there's just a level of plateau that you can reach on the sim and in person in general. And I think that if there was a higher skill gap in the gameplay in general, that I would more so agree with what the impact of the sim is. While I do think it is just a generally negative thing, I don't think it's as negative as it could be if there was a higher learning curve. Because the sim can be super beneficial if you're a noob and you need to get past that learning hump of how to actually play the game correctly. But when the gameplay's not changing, if you were already good at the game, let's say you've been to a couple regionals, and now you're testing with Purple Luffy, how much of an advantage can you get over other people? Because I could pick up the deck for the first time, having, you know, the amount of knowledge I have now, and I don't think that I would be any worse than a person who's already been playing with it, just because of like the cap we're at in terms of skill of the game. And for example, one thing that was demotivating me is, like you're saying about how it was rewarding to get better at locals and stuff like this. Well, you know, in Yu-Gi-Oh, I mean, this might sound kind of like I'm a dick, but I enjoyed like, you know, consistently topping the local events, you know, and just being like one of the consistently top people if I'm putting in that much, you know, time and effort versus other people. And I just don't think that that's the case in this game. For example, my friend Jovi, shout out to the boy Jovi, he pulled up to the tournament with us one time, and like set 2, or no, it was set 3. And we had him play Kaido. And we just got done eating, and he was drunk. He had taken like a lot of shots, and he had never played the game before. And so we gave him the Kaido deck. And his very first time playing the game at all. And he just starts off 2-0. Imagine you've been playing the game for like 4 or 5 months and you just lose to this guy who just picked up the game, just looked at the cards for the first time, and he's drunk, and you lost to that guy. How like defeating that is, just because of the amount of time you'd been putting in the game. Like, I like card games and I like solving puzzles and activities where you're rewarded by the amount of effort you put into the game. And the fact that that was actually possible for my friend to do really shows that that's an area of the game that is lacking.
I can see that. But I mean, that's one example too. And it could be just an outlier. Like that happens. You know, there's plenty of times where I have those stories where like, oh, this dude showed up, just played a deck he never played before and just won. Like that happens sometimes, you know? But no, I see what you're saying with that, but I don't know if I agree completely.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that's the end all be all. I still don't like the sim. I'm just saying that like I don't think that that's the bigger issue. It doesn't help, but I think that the gap in the game, like decreasing the plateau of the skill, is what really irritates me. And the sim just enables that, you know? It's like it just makes the issue worse. But even if the sim wasn't there, I think that this would still be a common issue in the game, is that, you know, you can show up and just not do well. So, for example, for me, you know, the deck that I had been playing, the Zoro list, I feel like at the time that was just, you know, the best deck in the game. And I put a lot of time into learning all of the exact, you know, combinations and all of the exact plays in the deck. And I've been to some locals, like recently I went, and the most recent locals live stream I did, I started off 2-0, and then I went 0-2. And the people that I lost to are some people who rarely ever like show up. They don't even go to the game store very often, don't go to many tournaments. And that's happened to me quite a few times in the game, where it's like traditionally in other games like Yu-Gi-Oh!, I'm never going to do worse than X1. And I understand that maybe that's like not like a good outlook for other people to assume you're going to do this good. But whenever I'm immersed into a game and I'm putting in so much time a day, like let's say I was putting in 5 hours a day into the game, and I show up and I just lose 2 games in a row, and that happens to me like, you know, 1 time out of every 5 tournaments, or like even more than that, that's really irritating as a person who enjoys feeling rewarded for the amount of time they put into the game. Like, I feel like for you in your situation with Blurple Croc, if you just showed up and you kept trying to make the deck better, but then you just kept getting cheesed by people and you could never break out of like going 2-2, or you only go 1-3, you'd probably move on because you weren't able to differentiate yourself. That was the whole point of why you went on that journey.
Yeah. And I want to ask you this. When you play locals for Yu-Gi-Oh!, is it best of 3?
Yeah.
There's a problem.
That's true. That is the bigger issue.
I think that is like one of the biggest issues with this game, is that it's best of 1. And in best of 1 formats, like, that just rewards luck more than skill. Because, like, I mean, think about those matches. You played those guys and you went, X2 in those rounds. If you would have been best 2 of 3, you probably would have stomped those clowns, right?
Yeah, maybe, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that is a big issue with the game too, that I don't probably shouldn't harp on right now, because I know we've been going on for a while, but I definitely think this being best of 1 at a local level, that's fine. Regional level, that's a problem. Just for me, because it's just like, the reason you have best of 3 is to mitigate luck in, increase the skills, like to show more skill. So when you have just like, I mean, how many games have you played in One Piece where you're just like, oh, I lost because he saw the nuts, or like he needed the one thing he did, and you only had 1 game to do that, and he did. So he just got rewarded for being lucky. And that really gets under my skin, because like Even Digimon. Digimon, I would say, is a super lucky game, right? But it's best 2 of 3. So at least like some of that luck is, extinguished by just like, okay, we have more variants, some of my skill can shine through a little more. They may get lucky one game, but if I'm consistent 2 other games, I can still beat them. I get people like playing short rounds, but I really think it should be best of 3, 60 minutes. At least at the regional level.
I completely agree. I mean, in Yu-Gi-Oh, it's best of 3, and I think they recently increased the time from 40 to 45 minutes. And, even in that game where it's like, the games are going to be a lot faster because you can end the game, in the first couple turns. You can get through the time. Some of the combos take like, 6 minutes to do, even if you're like very fast, but they can still even go best of 3. And if you think the time limit's an issue, like you said, just increase it. And also, people don't think about the aspect of if it was best of 3, then good people are just going to scoop and go to the next game when they know they've been bested, right? But because you know this is the only game you're going to play, even if it's like I'm about to be screwed, I just play it out because if I get this one loss, my tournament run is over. And I completely agree with you about the best of 3 thing. I just didn't want to bring that up because I thought that was just a well-known thing at this point. And in the beginning, I had always like given those thoughts and everybody just kind of shrugged them off. But I think over time, that irritation has just built up to where at this point, it's just not even acceptable. And I think I would be a lot more enticed to be competitive if that was the case. Imagine being at nationals and it's best of 1. It's like, okay. And then we look at like the events that have top cuts. They have best of 3. So we know that the game company isn't against doing best of 3. So why are we not implementing that? And I think that in a game like Yu-Gi-Oh, I think a better example would be Yu-Gi-Oh back in like 2012, 2013, when people couldn't like FTK you on the first turn of the game. I would be completely fine if at that point in Yu-Gi-Oh, it was best of 1 more than the justification of One Piece right now being best of 1 because of the higher variance. It's okay to have a higher variance game. You want to have certain people who can't put in as much time into the game, have an opportunity to win. But when it's like that and it is best of 1 and it's just like everyone at locals is playing the lucky sack deck, it's very irritating. I've said this a long time ago that there was a point in time where at my locals, let's say there's 20 people. Well, there was a couple tournaments when like 13 out of 15 or 13 out of like 18 people all played Purple Kaido because a lot of the people who couldn't grasp that learning curve or didn't want to put in as much time to the game realized, okay, I like playing this other deck, but I just can't beat anyone at all because I'm not that good or I don't have the time to put in the game. So I'm just going to play this sack-based deck. And when everyone's playing a sack-based deck and you're trying to be competitive, that just ruins the game. I mean, that's also why, like, even if I had an additional deck, I still wouldn't want to play in this meta. Like, if I had the opportunity to fly to Pasadena, I would just not do that because I don't want to play in a event that is supposed to be competitive and put in all this time to just inevitably go against 6 Katakuri, which is currently the most sack-based deck.
Yeah, it's the best of 1 deck for sure. And like another thing too that I don't really like about being best of 1 is like say you're playing somebody and they just pull out some sneaky shit. They're playing some tech that you weren't expecting. You're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. In best of 1, you're fucked. Sorry, you lost because of, a gimmick. But if you're playing best 2 of 3, you see that, you're like, okay, I lost the game because of that. But now I know that's in there. I'll just play around it, So that's another thing that just like it skews it to luck.
Sure.
And not being competitive.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying, the whole point of this discussion is that the game is really changing to who it's actually for. The removal of top cut, the consistency of these events. And they're not increasing the opportunities of these events. I don't think I've ever seen another TCG where there are more online events available. Obviously in Magic, like you can just do like instant queues on Magic Online, but that's not the same thing. It's not like the same level of event. You know, they don't have, you know, pro tours online like that, but in
No.
One Piece, it's like you can do an online regional or you can do an in-person one, and by a lot of people, those are regarded as like the same level of competitiveness, you know? And it's like, I don't like that. I think it takes away a lot of the integrity of the game by people cheating and stuff. And it also like diminishes, you know, what it means to win a tournament or top a tournament. Whenever Johnny, who, you know, works from home and never leaves his house, is in every online regional, he's like, yeah, I won a Treasure Cup, versus the guy who had to travel to this event, and there's only 3 tournament organizers in the United States. That is just so scuffed. Like, I don't know why there's no plans to increase the eligibility of the amount of organizers allowed to run events. You know, we've talked about this before, about the problems we have with Play TCG, and they really have no urgency to increase their ability to do better at these events because they're a gatekeeper of one of the only 3 people allowed to run the events. You yourself told me that in my area, we have 2 gold level Bandai stores, or whatever it is, the highest level you can get to. And the one store that I more commonly go to, they consistently hold a 400-person Yu-Gi-Oh! Regional, but for some reason, they aren't allowed to host a regional or at least apply to hold a regional. That gatekeeps so many people from entering the game, and it's caused a lot of people to leave just because even if you're not competitive, there's still a ton of people, I would say even more people than the competitive group, that they enjoy playing with their friends and they're excited to go to this event, to take a trip or go to the one that's nearest to them and just see how they do, see how they match up against other people they don't normally get to play. And a lot of people, that's out of reach. For me, you know, I've really been de-incentivized because most of the events from the only 3 organizers are not within a relative reasonable distance from where you and me live. And that's not the same with any other card game. And we live in, I guess you could say, close to the middle of the country. So you would assume there would be more opportunities. But that's just not the case. And I think that's really weird for the game company to go about it like that.
I agree. And it's just like, why have we had 3... I think we've had 5 tournaments in Texas. It's like, why don't we have a Kansas one? You know, like, why don't we have like somewhere else surrounding? It's because, lo and behold, Play TCGs out of Texas. And it's just like, that's not giving a lot of other people like who don't have the means to travel to Texas 5 times a year, like us, and like people who do live in Texas can. Like, you know, what about someone in like South Dakota if they're like, oh, I can't go to Texas, but if they had one in Kansas, maybe, you know. So I definitely think you said the right word, gatekeeper, for sure with them. And the thing with the online regionals, I get it's cheap and it's a way to make a lot of money because you don't have to rent event space and all that stuff like that. But like, I don't know, the game's growing, but the house that it's contained in this box of competitiveness is not growing. So it's just like you have this growing player base community that want to play at a competitive level, and you're not focusing in on that, and it's starting to really show, and it's starting to burn out people who are competitive like me and you. Now they're just starting to get fed up with it.
Exactly, you know, and I would argue that there is still a little bit of growth, but not on the same scale, you know, and I just don't understand the merit of having like competitive prizes worth playing for when you're not going to give everyone the opportunity to do those. It's like, you know, people have said this a lot in Magic, how they screwed over with the, you know, professional players league or whatever, because the reason people enjoyed the Pro Tour was because they could see themselves potentially qualifying for the Pro Tour in the future. And that's just not the case in this game because some people will just not ever have the opportunity to play in that. You know, we saw them lift the limitations on qualifying for nationals And why do you think that is? Because they didn't give enough people the opportunity to actually qualify for those. At this point, there's no reason to have two different things, a Treasure Cup and a regional. It's very commonly known in the community that a Treasure Cup was originally supposed to be a higher level event than a regional. But at this point, for a lot of people like myself, I didn't ever want to play in a Treasure Cup because I only wanted to play to get that invite. Sure, the cards are cool, but the cards could be removed, and I would still go to a regional just to qualify for Nats. And now they're removing that because they know there's some people I even know who won a Treasure Cup but never had the opportunity to play in a single regional just because the limitations and the gatekeeping.
Yeah, I think the Treasure Cups are stupid. When people are like, "Oh, are you playing in the Treasure Cup?" I'm like, "Why would I? There's no invites. The prizing, honestly, is worse than I feel the regionals because for a while there, they were given top 8 serialized cards for online regionals, and it was supposed to only be top 8 for online Treasure Cups. But then there's really not a lot of distinction between them, like you were saying, and it's just like, why would I ever? There's nothing for me. Like, you know how pissed off I would be, dude, if I never got my invite in the regional and then I got top 8 at a Treasure Cup. I'd be so pissed, dude. I'd be like, fuck, I could have had my invite right there. It's nice that I won that serialized card and got a couple grand. That's cool, but I'd still be like, could y'all, like, I don't know, hand me that invite, please?
Yeah. It's like that was supposed to be a greater accomplishment, winning a Treasure Cup, than a regional. But there's actually no merits to it. And then you can't even enter. Like, for you and me, the reason we want to play in a regional is to qualify for Nats. But we are gate kept from that because there's a large amount of people who are getting into the online or in-person regionals because the prizing is just better for entering. And so then you just have a bunch of people who just drop out. Like you're saying, they play their 3 games so that they can, just get this money and leave because they're a brokey. But then we're just over here like, okay, I guess I can't be competitive in the game. This is kind of unrewarding, not satisfying. Why would I not just do a high value activity?
Yeah. And webcams suck, dude. Like, one of the things we were harking on is just we like player base, we like hanging out with friends and homies. There's all that's removed in webcam. Unless you have your friends come over and hey, will you hang out in my living room while I go fuck off for 30 minutes, and then every 10 minutes I'll come out and hey dude, what's up, and then I'll leave again.
That's actually the only way I played in the regionals. My homie would set up his laptop in the other room and we would just go back and forth and just talk and smoke cigars and then come back and do it again.
Yeah, dude, I had one buddy, one regional, he came over and he's like, I just I want to see what it's like, and he would he was in the other room, of course, but through there, sometimes he would watch because he wasn't giving an advice or anything like that, but he just was curious to see it. And being able to have someone to talk to is just, that makes it so much more palatable. Because sitting here, just your match was over for 10 minutes and you're just looking at the clock, you're like, do I gotta make lunch? What what do I do? I'm just sitting over here just...
Bro, that's so fucking true. There's literally multiple people I know who are yeah, I'm in every single online regional. I work from home. I'm like, okay.
They're lonely bastards, bro.
You're a basement dweller. I'm gonna go, talk to some females, do some cool guy shit. You can have fun doing that because, I only enjoy playing card games for the human interaction. To meet cool people and have an enjoyable experience. Like I said, I don't really want to go to locals if my friends can't come. And like you're saying in webcam, that element is completely removed and the people are less friendly and less engaging on average in webcam, even when those other elements aren't there, because they're only in there to sweat. They're oh, can you turn on the heat, mom? I'm over here sweating. I need a Luffy. And I'm just I had a homie who came over and he was sitting 10 feet away and he just brought me a box of pizza and the guy was trying to call the judge on me. I'm like, bro, I have a really nice mic. If this guy is talking to me, you're going to be able to hear it on the microphone and see in my camera, because I also have like a camera that's 10x better than other people if he's like doing something to give me an advantage. This guy just brought me some pizza. He was like, well, I don't know, you could be like, doing this shit. And I'm like, okay. Like, I'm like, all right,
there's no way to enforce that, Like, it's people on webcam are always trying to get some kind of advantage. Dude, when I played Digimon, the first Nats was online, dude. I was playing this guy. Webcam turns on, and he's like, hey, how's it going, man? Sets his deck down. He's like, how'd you like me to cut? And I was like, bro, how about you shuffle on camera? Like, what kind of dirty shit is that?
You're like, okay, first do a pile shuffle, and then do 8 riffle shuffles, and then cut your deck into 3 piles.
Yeah, dude, I was just like, webcam people, dude, there's a reason, like you've been saying, there's a reason they only play on webcam, man, because, like, yeah, they suck. Not all of them, obviously, not all of them, but if you know who you are, you're a scumbag, bro. Sorry.
Exactly. I mean, I was looking back at, like, the first regional where I got cheated by the guy who ended up getting second place. And then, and while I was looking at that sheet, because I had a picture saved in my phone of it, I saw that the guy who got first place was actually the guy who I saw got permanently banned from the game. And I was like, oh shit. So that guy was cheating even then. And I'm like, dude, what? I'm like, how can you like do that and that be your main source of income? I say it all the time. If you're going to take it that seriously, where you're trying to cheat people for flattened papyrus squares, then you could probably put as much effort as you did into that in something else and just be so much more successful in life, have a good reputation, and make way more money. People say this all the time. It's not worth it to do illegal shit now because you can just make so much money in today's society by doing stuff legally.
Yeah, go be an electrician. Like, you only have to do 2 years for an associate's of that. At tech college, it's like, that's not that hard, my dude. Like, if you can put this much time into some pirate games and Pokemon, you got no excuses.
100%. So to kind of end things off, are you excited about set 5? Is there anything you're specifically looking at in the game going forward? Any content wise, or what do you got going on for us?
I think it's just gonna be the same old content. Just, some deck techs here and there. I like doing the commentary stuff, but I don't see any doing, like, if I get an idea for a video, I'll do it. I like doing the skits more. OP5, I'm as excited as I was for OP4, which is like, it's new cards, it's cool. But I'm going to be playing Sakazuki, Purple Luffy, because they're good decks. I probably will play more Sakazuki because it's just got more room for deck building, So that's what entices me about it, but I don't know. To me, set 5 is kind of a wash. It's like, if I go to Nats, it's a competitive season, but if I don't go to Nats, like, there's OP5, I don't have any regionals or anything scheduled for it because, it is between the holidays. So it's just like, I'll play less of it. And I'm not training for anything. So it's just like, do I make it just purely fun? So, I mean, I'm kind of in that predicament of just like, what is this format for me? I got into the Nats. I don't have a round bye, but, if I go, I'll grind OP5, and that's cool. But if not, I don't know, man. I might play less One Piece and find some other stuff to do.
I completely agree.
Yeah, how about you?
Honestly, I think I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, I guess you kind of enticed me with Sakazuki because I will say, like I said, what I'm looking for is more complexity to the game, more engagement. And I think out of like what's actually going to be viable, it's honestly kind of ridiculous that we already know what is supposed to be viable, and that's like a month away. And we've known that what is viable for like over the past couple months. I will say that one thing I want to focus more on in set 5 is I need to talk to some people in the Asian community, and I would like to like figure out when the like big tournaments are going on in Asia and do kind of like a tournament companion. Maybe we could do some like commentary over that together, something like that. I mean, that kind of entices me because then we're actually talking about what's good when it's actually coming out, which is, something I'm a big fan for. And I guess maybe I'll try the Sakazuki deck because it seems like it's increasing the skill level and I guess like complexity of the game somewhat, because I guess you have to decide, what do I discard here every turn? And maybe that's something I'll find enjoyable, but like you said, I don't think I'm going to be touching the cards until we get very close to that coming out, because I also like to find joy in initially opening those. So we'll have to see what happens, but I'm definitely feeling about more diversifying myself into other games and other things I enjoy doing. While you're young, like, you got to try to do stuff that you're not going to be able to do later on. And so, I mean, I've had a lot more fulfillment and enjoyment doing IRL content. And one of the big components of my channel and my brand initially is that I just want to showcase people what is happening going on this like IRL experience in card games for people who don't have the opportunity to do so. And I feel like that's where more of my personality comes out. And I don't think that, like you said, if you say there's no opportunities near us to go to events and stuff, I'm definitely going to be doing some different IRL content because it's more fulfilling to me. And I think it has more long-term potential because I've gotten to the point where I think, obviously I don't have that many subs, but I think I'm at a relative cap to where the game is at. You look at people like, who's the biggest person in this game? Maybe the Eggman. And I mean, I think he has like 17K subs, but this isn't even the only game he plays. And to me, I take this very serious. I've invested like thousands over, almost 20K, maybe more into, my videography business. And I want there to be at least some long-term thing to work at. And that doesn't have to be that this is a full-time job with this brand. But if there's no potential for it to even end up as like a side hustle, getting to like 50K subs within the near future, I don't see what the point is to put in as much work when I could work on developing my brand, somewhere else, because making videos is what I want to do, long term.
Yeah, I agree. I look at my commentary videos and like a new meta, they'll do really good. And then like later on in the meta, I'll post one and I'm lucky if it gets 100 views. And I'm like, all right, I guess the audience is done with commentary. So I'll just, I don't know, go do something else. Because I don't know, man. It's hard to get incentive to make, because like when you see that like, okay, the audience is bored with what I'm doing, I don't want to keep doing it. If it's just, I don't know. I get the consistency, but yeah, definitely what you're saying is just like, I thought when I started doing this, I thought the roof was a lot higher for as far as like content and getting subs and stuff like that. And it just kind of isn't.
Agreed.
Unless you're just like some Patreon coach and like, the YouTube is just a plug for that. Like, good for you.
But that's not even long term. We've talked about this before. It's like,
No,
I don't even want money. I just want to have the potential to grow. Like, I don't even have to see the growth now. I understand you got to be patient, but like you're saying, it's like, you have an expensive ass mic. You have a really good setup. And the fact that it's not even your fault that you're getting so low views on that content, because the reality is you could be doing that similar style of content in another niche and your long-term potential would be 50x higher. And you would probably be having much more success. Like, you could record yourself at the comedy club and that would probably do 10x better because both
100% would.
Both scenarios, you are bringing out your personality, which is why people should be coming to your content in the first place. But one of them just has such a small cap. I made a community post asking people if they want to see, another tournament vlog. And, the ones that I've done, I could do one of those at a Yu-Gi-Oh event and get 100K views on those. And in this game, it's like people just aren't interested in that. And, you know,
No, they're not.
one thing that's weird about card games in general, it's one of the last niches in the entire world where you can get away with having a really crappy setup and being a really bad editor. You see tons of people who have the most subscribers in these card game niches, and it's like, this guy is just recording out of a cardboard box with a backdrop. And for some reason, he's one of the most popular people in this niche. It's like, what is this?
Yeah, it's all one take, shitty mic. He's using the webcam from his fucking laptop. And you're like, how does this man have 65 subs? 65,000, sorry, yeah.
Exactly, and it's like, well, what is there in that, you know? Because I'm trying to improve my videos every time. You're trying to improve your videos every time. What was the point for me to invest in this if people don't really care about that aspect, you know? And I think that really stops a lot of people from that. And, you know, I think a lot of the big card game personalities in other niches, they also stream. And in this game, there is no potential to stream because of what the sim is. And you know, like you look at Lorcana, and it's like there was a guy who was not associated with the game. I'd never played the game, but I saw he made a simulator for the game. And I'm not trying to talk shit on the Batsu guy, but that simulator is on level with like the Magic Simulator, which has a dedicated team to putting that up, and it's enjoyable to watch. At least from my perspective, it looked like it. I don't make sim content anymore because I don't think it's enjoyable. And if my biggest critic, myself, wouldn't enjoy watching that, I don't want other people to have to suffer through that.
Yeah, and you know, it's really, another thing is like, I will record locals, I'll do commentary over that, and I enjoy watching that more than the sim, but there's just so much sim content, dude. Like, people will start out doing that, and then, like, you know, but then you got some dude who's just like, dude, I recorded 10 matches, you know, or I recorded 20 matches today. I'm done for the week, you know. I'm going to throw these out. I'm going to put 6 matches with Purple Luffy on there. People are going to just absorb that. And it's like, people don't care, like, I guess how garbage it looks, but and it's just like, man, like, why am I putting this effort when this man over here is just like, hey guys, I played Arlong today, and I played 20 matches. I recorded the 3 matches that I won, so here they are.
Yeah, it goes back to why you know, we're not satisfied with the state of the game, is that the people who were putting in more time are not necessarily being rewarded. And I think you could say the similar thing to the content side of things, but we'll just have to see that how that ends up going. Any final thoughts?
I hope the game gets better, dude. I love the game. It's fun. Like a lot of people in community, I want to be hopeful and hope that Bandai does something about it and that we see a new direction with it going into 2024.
Fair play. And where can the people find you at?
You can find me at It's Loading on YouTube, where I do a bunch of One Piece content, game commentary, sometimes Dex profiles, and sometimes skits.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you for the conversation. As always, if you got this far in the video, make sure to smash the like button, turn post notifications on, and subscribe to the channel, and as well as subscribe to Mike's channel. And as always, if it's not the goo, it's got to go. Peace.
Ooh, is that indigo?